Hello, hello, Magicon Minneapolis. So good to see you here at the main stage for our next panel. We've got an art and world building panel inside the art of March of the Machine. If you're like me, you're interested to learn about how worlds and sets and events are brought to life through the art and the flavor of the cards that we all love to play with so much. And you're in the right place right here and right now to learn a little bit more about this set, March of the Machine, and the world building that has gone on as part of bringing this massive event to life. In a few moments, we're going to see people from both inside and outside the Wizards building talking about how they managed to pull together, again, an event, a narrative of such huge scope and condense it into the cards that we're playing with at the moment. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce the host of this panel, my friends. Please put your hands together for the one and only from Ristic Studies. It is Sam. Here he comes. Welcome to the stage, mate. It's so good to have you. Have a great panel, mate.
Let's go. All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome. So good to see so many familiar faces. This is the third panel that I've done that is the exact same format, so I feel very comfortable. I'm ready to roll. If you don't know who I am, I'm Sam. I'm from the channel Ristic Studies, and I love the art and world building and flavor text and all of the creative elements that go into building a Magic set. That's kind of what my whole shtick is. So I feel really honored to be joined by two folks from Wizards today. We're basically going to go behind the scenes of how a gigantic Magic set like March of the Machine is built. And oftentimes these folks are working with a year and a half in advance. And the process kind of goes, you have to set up a lot of concept art, a lot of world building writing at the very front. The goal is to get a quantity of materials together that artists can later use to produce final illustrations that you see on the Magic cards. So it's a really iterative and a creatively collaborative process, and it takes a long time, and especially for a set like this whose scale is tremendously huge. We haven't seen a set like this since probably War of the Spark. So again, the goal is to kind of walk through that process with folks who are writing, providing concept art, and then we have two illustrators who are also, obviously in the artist gallery, and get an insight into how they actually take those words and turn them into images. So that's what we're doing today. I hope you enjoy this. I'm so excited to introduce you to Taylor Ingverson and Neil LaPlante Johnson. So please give it up for them. They're my first two guests. All right. So first things first, I would like you to introduce yourself one at a time and kind of give us an idea of what you do in the building at Wizards of the Coast. We'll start with you, Neil.
Yeah, my name is Neil LaPlante Johnson. I'm a world-building game designer on the writing team, and my job is to take all the awesome art and tools that Taylor gives me and create concepts and prompts that show up on the illustrations of cards that you've grown to love.
Yeah, so Neil is on the word side. I know Jamie's in the audience. We got Gaurav, and they're also on shout out to writers. Yeah, they're the word crunchers of the world. So yeah, and what do you do, Taylor?
So I'm the principal art director on the world building team, and for this particular set, I was the art lead. And it's kind of crazy to think that in 6 years, Magic will be as old as many planes as we attacked in this set.
Yes, we've got almost as many planes as years that the game has been running, and like you said, we had to destroy them all. So cool. So obviously, a lot of this is about parsing creative solves and a lot of the challenges that come with 30, 40, 50 planes kind of colliding all at once. So let's talk first, set the scene for me, Neil. What's going on in the sets, narratively speaking, and what's kind of unfolding as on the grandest scale of these cards?
Yeah, so March of the Machine is what we're calling an event set. You might have seen War of the Spark, and this means that this is like a huge, massive battle or some kind of set piece that's just above the scale of what a normal set is possible. But March of the Machine in particular is the biggest we could have ever done this. Rather than a plane as a stage, we're talking the entire multiverse as the place where this battle is happening. So we're going everywhere from Jalfir again, Dominaria, to New Phyrexia, everywhere. So this is blockbuster scale on a different level, and we've never done this before.
Cool. And obviously the biggest villain in the multiverse, the one and only Elishnorn. I think that's our first slide here. Ready to conquer the multiverse all at once, which is probably strategically not the smartest, but it's about sending a message, all right? Okay. So we got Elishnorn going. Let's go to the next slide. What else is going on? Like, what is the device that Elish is trying to use?
So what you're seeing on screen right now is Realmbreaker. This is like a fragment of the world tree that Elishnorn has cultivated and grown so that her invasion of the multiverse all at once can happen. So this is a Phyrexianized world tree, essentially, is what we're seeing here. And it's able to connect to any plane in the multiverse and let in Phyrexian troops and simultaneously surprising and just crazy.
Yeah. And I know we're going to look at some concept art from Realmbreaker because that was something that you enjoyed from the set. So, let's keep going through the next one, Sean. So I like this image because immediately, if you've been following Magic for 5, 6, 7 years, you know exactly where this is without thinking. You already understand the entire visual language, and on their side, they get to lean into what they're calling visual solves for something like this. So Neil, what's going on here? How do we know where we are right away?
Yeah, so what's important about a plane, it always changes between location to location, but we're seeing the filigree motorcycle-looking device here, and immediately you go, that's Kaladesh. The architectural elements scream Kaladesh. And when you're concepting on a plane and putting things on a plane, it's important to identify those unique elements that every player goes, I know exactly where I am. We don't often have a ton of room in titles or flavor text to communicate where or what's happening. So we really have to be careful and considerate about what we're putting on the card. And so here, anybody, like you said, could look at this. If they have any knowledge of Magic planes, they can identify it. And even if they don't, when they start to learn, they can go, oh, I know exactly where that is because I see these filigree elements or the armor or the ether or the architecture.
This is really useful. I mean, the showcase frames help a lot when you're panning through a March of the Machine booster pack, but just looking at the visual elements, it helps you parse kind of the quantity elements of March of the Machine, and it comes out in details like this with the character design, with architecture. And then in the background, Taylor, there it is once again.
Branch of the world of Realmbreaker.
Yeah.
Super exciting.
So this was something that your team was intentional about too, right? Like you wanted this set. You didn't want anyone to look at this image and say this is from Kaladesh, right? You wanted this to be, oh, this is March of the Machine. So talk me through some of the visual solves there.
Yeah, so throughout the entire set, as Neil was saying, like all of the planes have awesome visual cues already. So what we didn't want, as you were alluding to, was you to think, especially if you're a new player, like, oh, this is just a Kaladesh card or a Return to Kaladesh. But we wanted to ground you in that this is a March of the Machine set card based on Kaladesh, and there's a couple more things that we'll be talking about later this panel to help drive that story through.
Awesome. Yeah, so Realmbreaker is kind of typically in the background of a lot of these cards. I'm interested in the concept side, so there was concepting Realmbreaker as a massive weapon. I think that's the next slide here. Was something that your team wanted to put together, right? I guess, yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we really, really wanted to have introduce what Norn would use to actually break through all the seals around the entire multiverse to slam into every single plane and make it feel menacing and have something that was larger than life, that felt like the plane was truly under threat without even having to see any Phyrexians running around on the ground just yet. So what we wanted to do with Realmbreaker is the previous image was the seed core, which is sort of the heart of the Phyrexianized world tree, but we wanted to design some really menacing mechanical looking branches that would span out into the blind eternities and puncture holes into the planes of the multiverse and implant themselves and sort of embed themselves like a tick into every plane. We also have these things, and I think it's like lower right, these little seed pods that if you look at the concept art of Realmbreaker, it sort of has this mouth-looking shape, these 3 prongs. And on the inside, if you ever get a look up close at the art, there's almost like little teeth-like things in there. And those are actually all the seed pods that was sort of like bloom, 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 like shoot out once it landed.
Sweet.
And sort of launch out into the plane and launch out these things called converters, which are the creatures right next to the seed pods that would seek out and convert people on the spot with little stingers in their tails, or they've got crazy cages on their backs that can bring people back to these seed cores that sort of links up with the cocoon mechanic. So that was something that we wanted to introduce for this set as sort of an additional add to what we saw in All Will Be One, to really make it feel like Norn was bringing everything to bear in this invasion.
So I like looking at concept art because a technical term that gets thrown around in art a lot is shape language. And one way to think about shape language is, what do the shapes and the silhouettes of, let's say, Realmbreaker's arm here, what do they connote? Like, what do you think of immediately? You know from a quick glance that this is a menacing, sharp weapon that probably has some velocity to it. And say, for example, if Realmbreaker was big and bulky and circular, it wouldn't give you that connotation. So the shape language, I think, like, if you pass concept art to an artist, you know, how would an artist kind of use concept art like this? Like, what is the goal when you give them an image like this?
So the goal for us, especially with Realmbreaker, is that all the Praetors are helping out with this invasion, and we wanted it to feel like this was Norn's invasion and not everybody else's. So the materials used on Realmbreaker were specific to her aesthetic. So with white porcelain, red sinew. So that's something that we wanted to get across, and basically just the aggression. Norn is very elegantly scary, but we wanted her to have something that felt very intimidating, like you knew it was built for the attack and not necessarily sitting on a throne.
Yeah, perfect. This is an attacking weapon. That's another way to think about shape language. So Neil, on your side, another question you have to juggle with on the writing side is, well, we have an invading army. How does a plane prepare and deal with an invading army? And how do I write that into the visual language of the set? So I think we have a slide next is on Strixhaven. So what's going on with an image like this?
Yeah, so every plane in the multiverse will have its own ethos, or the way that it likes to fight or not fight in this case. The students of Strixhaven are maybe less prepared than some other planes to fight. So they use subterfuge. You can see them hiding in a library behind bookcases and peeking out to see if they can maybe get an escape going. Whereas if we go to the next slide, on call time, they're always ready to fight. So we got to show some really intense action scenes. And if they die, they get to boast about it forever. So we can see the ethos of these planes differentiate themselves in each card. And that was important as a writer, to capture what is important about a plane, not just architecturally, visually, but also just in a language that says, like, oh, we know what the people on this plane would do if confronted with this extraplanar threat.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite of all the planes in negotiating this question? Like,
I love Strixhaven.
Yeah.
It's so fun to see. You know, everyone's kind of ready to fight. The Magic Multiverse is a pretty violent place, but Strixhaven's kind of like, can we not?
yeah.
So that's always fun.
I gotta study. Like, sorry.
I'm just here to learn. I got finals tomorrow. Like,
Yeah, like I got finals, not again. You know, trying to take this exam. That's the me's of the world. Yeah. And the flip side, obviously, if you have an invading army, you have to create stakes. And March of the Machine was invested in answering a different question, which is, what happens when the denizens succumb to the invasion? What happens when they're completed? So Taylor, we're looking at an image like this. Walk me through this one.
This one actually came through with just a question as we were putting artwork up on the walls, like, can we complete a god? Yeah, that sounds pretty cool. Let's go with that. But we wanted the visuals of the Phyrexians in March of the Machine to feel different or bring something new than what you saw in All Will Be One. There's still full Phyrexians running around from all the layers on the planes, but we wanted it to feel more like an invasion and more like an unwilling conversion to completion, or perfection, as known as it. So what you'll see throughout the set are denizens that are almost half completed. You get the shape language from their original plane with varying Praetor language, like here with Hylia being completed by Jingataxius's approach, and getting more of like the it's less clean, it's less perfect. It's an awkward blend of like almost humanity fighting against this sort of unwilling conversion.
it's a work in progress.
It's a work in progress. Yeah, like
This is a work in
eventually maybe you can be perfect, but right now I'm using you as a tool to get my job done. But we wanted the feeling that nothing would be more terrifying than your own people family, friends being converted in front of you and then turning around and coming after you.
In terms of tone, All Will Be One, the previous set, was very doom and gloom, dark, heavy. March of the Machine has like a very whimsical, joyful slant to it, and some of that comes through with the team-ups. So this was another fun challenge for you, right, Neil? Like, talk about the team-ups.
You know, everything's challenging when you're doing any kind of work, but when you get to write, hey, could you show Yargle and Multani is acting as actual armor on him, and what's that going to look like? You get some really fun and interesting team-ups, and it's just a way to kind of lighten the tone a little bit, like you said, because we don't want this to just be a villain story again. One was this is the majesty of Phyrexia. Phyrexia is attacking, and there's plenty of stakes here, but we're also seeing the cool, creative ways that people will fight back. We probably have another couple team-ups, and probably people's favorite if we go to the next slide.
Yeah, this is my favorite by far. Yeah.
This is Borborygmos and Fibblethip. The unique challenge of having two incredibly differently sized people, much like Taylor and myself, in the same place at the same time. But in this humor, we get to see like kind of the heroism and coolness of the planes. We don't get to see them just suffering. We get to see like, well, what if you were pushed to the limit and your best or your most hated enemy became your best friend for one set?
Yeah.
And that's really fun.
Yeah, these ones were incredibly fun to work on, very challenging to everything that you brought up. Like, Rudy Siswanto absolutely crushed this, but we have like a 1 foot character with a giant trying to get them in like a 2-inch window. It's like, oh, that's a challenge, but let's go for it. So these were a lot of fun. These did bring more of like some whimsy to the set that could have on the flip side been very, very dark.
Yeah.
The lucky thing is that not finding Fibblethip, if you can't find him, that's kind of the point.
That's kind of the point. It's hiding.
Right, so we have the team-ups to counteract the whimsy. You have another challenge, Taylor, visually, and maybe we can make this like a lightning round.
Sure.
Magic is a non-linear storytelling. Like, you see a lot of cards, and you don't usually get A, B, C, D, E. You see D, and then you go back to A, and you have to try to put this non-linear puzzle together. So you have to rely on the visual language of a set. So we know that the Phyrexians invade in 5 stages. Could you walk me through like the cues for each stage?
Yeah, for sure. Everything that you were saying about it being non-linear, we wanted to provide some tools for people as they're opening up packs to be able to like put the story and progress time throughout the story with their cards. So it's a tool that we've used before with sort of environmental cues to help drive that along. So along with Norn's Invasion Force, the Realmbreaker, these 5 stages were really, really important and hit sort of like key moments and story beats where you'll see the environment shift to help drive those moments forward to match up with the fiction. So the first stage is actually kind of on a lot of creatures that end up getting completed. But you'll see a Phyrexian symbol show up in various ways throughout the environment. They can be very small, super subtle, like on the rat from Kamigawa below, or it can be a little bit louder, like the blaring symbol in the background of Pelucranos. Like, that doesn't belong on there. What's going on?
Yeah.
So this was more of like an omen of what was to come, of everything starting to feel a little bit weird, of symbols and certain shape language that's not supposed to appear on those particular planes.
These were fun to concept as well, because we had to look at where would a Phyrexian symbol appear on a plane, and how can we make it kind of look natural, but on second glance you go,
wait a minute.
What?
Wait a minute. And then for stage 2, on the next slide here, we'll see things start to progress and people start to realize that something's definitely going awry as portals start to break open and make room for Realmbreaker to come through the plane. So you'll see sort of like the inverse of the Phyrexian symbol open up to the blind eternities and start connecting to each other with red tendrils, and the sky begins to darken a little bit and things become a little bit more menacing. And then for stage 3, this is sort of definitely our major blockbuster stage of everything. We wanted to light everything on fire and make everything bad for the denizens of the plane. So you'll see the portal. Realmbreaker is key here in being able to see a portal and Realmbreaker breaking through into the plane. You'll also see Phyrexians or denizens of the plane being converted, like the giant below on Kaldheim. that's sort of an example of a variance from All Will Be One and how we wanted to treat Phyresis this time around. So this is an all-out war. Like, every plane is fighting at this point, and the stakes are pretty high. And then when we move on to stage 4, this is where things start to get a little bit creepier, a little bit more menacing. These are planes that aren't necessarily winning the fight or holding back the Phyrexians that well. This is also the stage where you'll see a lot of legendary characters that have been converted. And so for the environmental cue for this one is the sky begins to get that deep, like, magenta, dark reds. Sorry, every artist, for making a stage that is very monochromatic.
Yeah, there's a quick sidebar here. Is like magenta became Taylor's nightmare color, and all the artists who worked on the set
print
nightmare
well?
color. Yeah, it's like not magenta again, you know? Yeah.
But within this stage as well, like you can see with Castle Ventress, Phyrexia starts to take hold, and porcelain and sinew start to grow over the existing shape language of that plane. So you'll see sort of in some planes there's like floating inky orbs that are dripping everywhere, menacing silhouettes in the background. Phyrexia is really, really beginning to take hold at this point. And then at the last moment, we get sort of a heroic boon, which is stage 5, where Halo breaks through the blind eternities into all the planes and sort of allows the heroes, sort of halts Phyresis for a second and allows the heroes a little bit more of a chance to fight back against the invaders of their plane.
My challenge for everyone here, the next time you open a MOM booster pack, if you're drafting, just look at the art really quickly and try to see if you can intuit which stage of the invasion we're on, and probably you can figure out from these visual cues. And again, that's kind of the solve for the non-linear element of Magic storytelling. Very quickly, Neil, could you write us home? What's going on with the narrative? What are these big blockbuster moments that needed to be caught on camera, and the sort of prompts you're sending to illustrators? What is this? How does this story get to its summit?
Yeah, so I think, honestly, one of the real heroes of this set is Ren. If we go to the next, we'll see Ren and Chandra arriving on New Phyrexia. They have a plan, and they need to get somewhere real fast. But Norn isn't going to let that happen. So the newly reincarnated Elspeth that's shed her past self and become an angel bursts into New Phyrexia, distracting Elish Norn long enough and engaging in battle with her to allow Kost, Malira, Chandra to kind of carry Ren, and you see this beautiful piece, carry Ren to the Seed Core so that she can merge with Realmbreaker. And as she merges with Realmbreaker, she reaches out across the multiverse to Ferry in the plane of Jalfir, and hatches a devious plan to switch and phase out New Phyrexia and phase in Jalfir where New Phyrexia was, and replace it. And in the ensuing chaos, we see the Jalfir Knights kind of hold the line as the Mirrans and other people who are not Phyrexians retreat onto Jalfir. And then Karn is left and says, I have one last thing to do. And portraying his vows of pacifism unmakes Elish Norn, and kind of a cathartic yet tragic ending to this story.
Yeah.
This isn't the end, obviously. You'll find more in our fiction, but those are the big beats we want to see.
Okay, so imagine you have that as your prompt to paint, like all of that in the words, right? I would like to actually ask a couple of artists now who receive documents in words like this and have to translate that scale and produce an image, which sometimes we take for granted that started as words, right? So we're going to have two artists join us today, and we're going to do a little night show shuffle here. So please welcome to the stage. This is Chris Ron and Livia Prima, please. Woo-hoo. Nice big welcome. Okay, welcome in. So if you'd like to introduce yourself, please, for our audience.
Okay, hello everybody. My name is Livia Prima, and I've been doing magic art since 2017. Actually, I came here together with Billy Christian, who is also a magic artist and happens to be my husband.
Wonderful, yeah.
Yeah, we came here together, and we also live together and work together at our little home studio. So we always help each other out in creating illustrations. He also the one who creates the artwork for this event, the promotional artwork, and Yeah, that's pretty much it. Oh, one more thing. Actually, I'm from Indonesia, and I'm not very confident in my English speaking skill. So, yeah, I'm trying my best, but yeah.
You're doing wonderful. Yeah, exactly. 15 thumbs up. Let's go. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's a long flight from Indonesia, as you can imagine, so we're very grateful Livia's here. Much closer is Chris. Could you please introduce yourself? No flight from Indonesia for you, right?
Hey everyone, yeah, just a flight from Seattle.
Okay, tough.
Yeah, hi, my name's Chris Ron. I've been working on Magic since, I believe, 2007. Cards came out in 2008, something like that. Alara, Conflux. I'm also here with my wife, who's also a Magic artist, Alex Bronwyn.
Yeah.
Over there. It's funny that we're both in that situation. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Happy to talk art.
Cool.
The machine.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So let's get into it. So the first painting we have is from Livia. It's called Iridescent Blade Master. It's a common, and I love these kind of bread and butter cards that really set the scene. Again, kind of referring to 10 minutes ago, you can probably intuit which stage of the invasion this is from a certain color, okay? Hint, hint, nudge, nudge, all right? But Livia, I'd like you to walk us through all of the elements at play in this painting and what you had to translate into an illustration.
All right, Iridescent Blade Master. The brief itself is pretty straightforward. A female warrior lunging forward with her filigree sword. However, even though this is a character-focused art, I still need to think about how to depict the large-scale war that is happening in Kaladesh. So in order to do that, I need to bring the camera level to a higher point perspective so we can get a better view of the plane in its late stage of Phyrexian invasion. And so I also put the from the up top we can see the one of the most iconic building in Kaladesh, which is the Etherflux Reservoir, and we can also see some of the realm breaker branches on the top, and also one of the buildings that has a Phyrexian symbol on top of it. Yeah, I think that's all.
And we spoke a little bit about sort of the symbolism at play here too. These are the details that come through. So you have some branches kind of crossing through the filigree elements on the bridge. That was a choice from you, right?
Oh yeah, I like the idea to put some little bit of greens in the foliage and also in the clouds, just to give a nuance that there's still hope going on in the middle of this battle.
Yeah. You see, these are the details that I love. When I speak to artists, I always find this kind of stuff. And Taylor, obviously, this is which stage? You have to give away the answers. Yeah.
Well, there's little glints in there, so this one's technically stage 5, but that magenta really, really comes through. But with this piece, this is actually something that comes up quite often. That's my favorite part about working with such brilliant artists, is that there's a Phyrexian symbol showing up on one of the towers that wasn't asked for, but just through Livia going through the guide, just added in some surprises that rooted it more into the setting.
Awesome.
And that's part of my favorite part of the job, is getting surprises from artists that are like, that's way cooler than what we asked for. Let's run with that.
They really make you look good, huh?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean, that is our job.
Cool. So that's Iridescent Blade Master. Now I'm gonna pass to you, Chris. So you had Kogla and Yadaro. There's that magenta again. Right?
I know. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Yeah,
Every brand of red.
Yeah, walk me through this. Talk me through what's going on with these characters, and yeah, any insights you have.
Yeah, so basically, I mean, I was reading through my assignments. I'm like, okay, cool. This sounds like an awesome, battle. I think, you mentioned the word pile driver was actually in the art description.
I said a suplex by 2 professional wrestlers.
That was the art description. Suplex by 2 professional, spear suplex. Yeah.
Exactly. And when I looked at the Yadaro art, I'm like, oh, he's got these crystals on his back. We could totally do something with this. And then I'm looking through the style guide. I'm like, oh, magenta. Okay. I had to pull my bin out and like dig through like the bottom of it. Like I haven't used this color in so long. And eventually, I dust it off. That's one of the great things about oil paints, though, is they do last quite a while. And so I worked up this color study to try to manage all those colors. That is one of the more challenging things about a piece like this, where there's a lot of related colors, but there's like warm reds, cool reds, moving into violet, but it's all in that spectrum. And then luckily, part of the idea with the Ikoria monsters, or kaiju, whatever we're calling them, was them having this new crystal armor that's sort of cyan color. So I was like, oh, sweet, there's something in this that isn't gray or pink or red. So like you could get that sort of color pop. But yeah, it was surreal. And aside from all that technical stuff, like it was really just getting down to sketching, trying to get that feeling of like, yeah, it's like this funny kind of wrestler vibe, but also it's this scary, sad time on Ikoria. So I wanted to get that feeling of like dust and kind of desolation, like things have been really kind of broken down from all this fighting. And these guys don't know which way it's going to go, but they are just so mad about what's going on.
And you got a chance to reference kind of a character that you had worked on previously. What's it like to revisit a character?
Yeah, it was interesting, as I got to do Kogla originally, and that was also an interesting challenge with those giant crystals.
Right.
So it was cool to go back to him, get him going in a different pose, new armor. And also, I think Jesper Ising did the original Yadaro, which was a really awesome painting. I'm a huge fan of Jesper's work. But getting to like fold them in together and get them working together, because I feel like a lot of the Ikoria creatures were shown on their own.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's sort of a running theme with these team-ups, but it was really cool with these kinds of characters to be able to mash them together and kind of get a sense of their relationship.
So Livia's first card was like the bread and butter common. We have an invasion moment. The next one is the blockbuster. Like you get an art brief like this, and you take a deep breath. You're like, all right, like challenge accepted. So this is Elspeth's Smite, right?
Yes.
This is the types of images how we remember a set 5 years removed, 10 years removed. How do you receive an art brief like this? What's your process for something of this scale?
All right. My first priority in creating magic artworks is always readability. So we must able to see everything from a 2-inch size space on the card, right? So since there are quite a lot of things going on in the scene, I just play it safe and get the camera angle lowered down a little bit to give an overall epic feel to the scene. And then secondly, it's about the pose. I remembered receiving the illustration of the side as a reference for this illustration. I think it is very cool, and I just want to copy the pose straight down. But I think, because she's holding a different weapon, I need to create a different pose for this illustration. So I took several reference pictures of myself holding a stick, posing as Elspeth, just to choose which one looks the best for her. The pose itself has to be dynamic, powerful, while also able to let us see the new armor design of hers that I really love. And thirdly, after I figured out all the main elements in the picture, I move on to the rest of the elements in the background, which is the realm breaker branches. And I found a difficulty in figuring out how to render those effectively. So actually I asked Billy to help me out, and he's just brilliant.
So you teamed up with Billy Christian for this one. Yeah, there was a little meta detail here. Yeah, she teamed up with her husband, who is an artist. You mentioned Deicide. If you remember Deicide from the original Theros block, there was a moment like this where we have someone killing a god, and you get to kind of playfully tongue-in-cheek, since that's part of Mom's whole ethos is to make references that deep-cut Magic players would know and love. So if you've been playing a while, you might notice Deicide is referenced slightly in this. What's a challenge? You work digitally. What's a challenge for you in terms of the medium that you work within that kind of comes through in this painting?
I could probably call it both a benefit and a challenge. Well, I don't know, because I kind of find it hard to stick to one particular rendering style. So at times I want my paintings to feel, to have this very traditional hand painted feel, but at some other times, like the one in Elspeth's Might, I wanted to have this very digital, shiny looking painting. So yeah, I often find myself struggling between the two styles, and I often tell myself and push myself that I have to be versatile and able to do both styles. But at the same time, I also often feel like I kind of lose the sense of my own style in the middle of the process. So yeah, I think I need to dig deeper into myself to know what I actually really, really love, and to embrace it and to move forward. And yeah, I also learned to paint traditionally, and sometimes I incorporate traditional mediums in my digital art. So yeah, I hope I can get better too.
Well, this is lovely. We're always our own worst critics, artists especially. So if you like this painting, please just give this a round of applause.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. There's so many elements happening, you know, and something that I kind of learned throughout this process is Alish Noren's also like 5,000 feet tall, so like, God, I have to deal with that. So we're going to pass it back to Chris, who works traditionally, and there's this push and pull always with your media. Like, you have benefits and you have drawbacks. This is our first rehearsal. Chris just looked at this and exhaled and said, "This is a lot." So this is a lot. So this is Hidetsugu and Kairi. Chris, let's go back.
I mean, that was my internal monologue when I was sitting at my computer and the assignment came in. I'm like, oh, okay, who are these guys? And I look at the reference. I'm like, so it's a team up, but one of them is an insanely huge dragon that's, I'm assuming, is hundreds of feet long. So really, it came down to like, okay, we're going to have to fit all that we're asking for here. It's going to have to be planned like crazy. So I wound up sinking a lot more time in early on this piece to just kind of find where all the puzzle pieces should be and how bright and what color. And there's also multiple light sources that are all reflecting off of each other and all kinds of things going on. So it really was just this game of like, we have to communicate everything in this brief. We have to include everything, but there's so much, and it has to read this big.
2 by 2.
So for that reason, it honestly was one of the more challenging assignments I've ever had. I mean, it needed to be that, absolutely. I'd have no regrets about any of it, but it was definitely like, okay, all bets are off. I need to focus 100% on this to make it work. And I mean, people seem to think it came together, so fingers crossed. But yeah, it was. I kept getting this feeling from it that, I mean, I don't want to make comparisons to the Avengers or anything, but it's this epic scene of like that swirling camera shot of everything's going down, nobody knows what's going to happen, everything's a panic, you've got good guys and bad guys working together that normally would not be. And it was just a wild challenge to pull off, but I was pleased with it. It's one of the largest paintings I've ever done for Magic the Gathering. Wow. It's 24 by 30 inches. It's a huge thing, but like you get to the point where even on this big painting, like some of their heads are like this big, you know? So just dealing with, I mean, that's another thing with working traditionally is like when you're working in digitally, you can zoom in and get details going on, but like eventually you get down to like how small of a movement can I make with this tiny brush and get the mediums to work with me. But yeah, it was a fun challenge. Once really the pressure was off once I finished the sketch, because I got all the planning and color and everything done there, but until then it definitely felt like a tightrope walk.
And you mentioned there's a detail in the dragon itself. This is one of your friends, a working illustrator for Magic, etc., Tyler Jacobson.
Mm-hmm.
So you had to take notes from his design, right, for this dragon?
Yeah, absolutely. I basically went to his Twitter and got like the biggest version of the file I could. Okay, cool. So how do these details work? And then I think I actually talked to him about it, because I mean, Tyler and I are chatting all the time because we live near each other and we're good buddies. But Like, okay, so what was the thinking on this part of the anatomy? I know there's an origami influence that informed a lot of like how angular it is and those shapes along its back. And so it's like, if there's only one painting of it, sometimes you have to really dig for details about like, okay, what would this part of its back look like that's not in those paintings, you know? So yeah, and early on, I very quickly realized that the dragon basically has to be the background.
Yeah.
Between the
The
dragon.
dragon's the background for this painting, yeah.
Right. I mean, there's buildings poking out and stuff, but it's at that scale, like you got to put it far away so it fits it all. The lightning effect has to be pretty pronounced. And also it's like, okay, I'll make the lightning really bright so that the dark Hitotsugu stands out in front of it. And because that's another thing that's so important with designing for Magic, is to get things to read at a small size. You really have to have clear silhouettes where, like, you know, dark on light, light on dark, just so you can understand what's happening on the card.
And I think you mentioned light sources. These are the details I love when we get to a full res image. Is on Hitotsugu proper, if you look, behind, obviously you have the lightning that's blue, that's gently curving around the top of the head. And then in front of him is a different source of light, which is a flame. So we got the reds and orange that kind of glimmer across the chest. And these are the details that like other artists are envious of Chris for being able to manage that with oil paints, you know? This is like, if you ask the artist, it's like light sources give me HE double hockey sticks. So like this is even a balancing act with that. Any other final notes on this piece?
I mean, aside from having another excuse to jokingly give Taylor trouble at every point.
Perfect.
I mean, I'm pleased with it. And that's not true of
Right.
the majority of my
That's a
paintings.
feat, right? He likes it.
But that was one of the few where I'm like, this actually came out the way that I kind of meant it to.
Nice.
So.
Yeah, I remember in our rehearsals, again, this is a beautiful detail. Like Chris said that like after a long day of painting this one, I just had to sit down and stare at a blank wall. You know? So yeah.
Just
We
like
were not
smoke
trying
coming
to
out of my ears.
Right. Coming out like eyes looking two different directions. Yeah.
Crazy.
Wonderful. Okay, so we are going to conclude it here. We have a nice little beautiful slideshow of various battles that will carry us through the Q&A section. So this part of the panel is always devoted to you. So if you have pressing questions or any sort of curiosities you'd like to bring forward out of our guests, please line up at the microphone here, and we will take your questions. So as they're assembling, please, one more round of applause for the world building and artisan here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, take us away. Yeah.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Good.
I was curious to know if you guys had a preference or found one was more challenging than the other of getting an assignment to draw an iconic character like Elish Norn or something like that that's been done so many times and people know and have a picture exactly in their head for what Elish Norn looks like, or a character that maybe hasn't been done before and you can maybe have a little bit more creative freedom with it. If you have a preference for one or the other, or if you know one is particularly more challenging than the other. But
You want to go first on that one, Livia?
You can answer.
Okay. Well, for me, and this is actually something I really like about working on Magic in particular, is like I get bored if I'm stuck on one thing for too long. Like there was a point in, I want to say it was Zendikar in like my second year where I just kept getting like demon after demon after demon, and I never thought that I would be at the point where I'm like, give me something other than a demon, please. So it really just comes down to like, there may be a bit less creativity in terms of design with iconic characters, but there's like, it's really cool to be like handed that precious thing that it really is important that it comes out well for the nature of the game. Like those are great, but I also love being able to do, like every once in a while we get an assignment where they're just like, listen, we just need like a big weird green monster that would live here. Like, could you just make it up? And either one of those, I feel like if I were to get them exclusively, I would start to not necessarily get bored, but you know, it turns into a grind if it's too consistent. So the variety of things that I've been asked to paint, like it keeps me on my toes. It's challenging at the same time too, but I don't know. I prefer it like that. Like doing things that are too repetitive are I don't know. I feel like I can't grow as fast.
awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Hello. So what I wanted to know was, obviously it being an invasion across the multiverse, how much does movement inform a lot of the pieces and the artwork that you did throughout the set?
Movements like visual, like actual
Visual movements.
Cool.
And then, because not only you have Realm Breaker, but obviously the characters therein.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How does movement inform or challenge you in terms of painting?
You want to start with this one, Livia?
Probably you're better at answering.
I mean, we both wound up with pretty dynamic pieces in March
Yeah.
of the Machine, so I guess either one of us could probably take this one. But yeah, I feel like movement was actually one of the bigger challenges when I started working on Magic. Like, my stuff was probably a little bit more static than I would have liked it to be. I was very young when I started on Magic. I was like 23. But as time went on, I realized that and tried to get better at movement and dynamism and a sense of that. And I feel like, I mean, I don't think you could do a set like March of the Machine without a lot of dynamic movement. And there's so many ways to accomplish that with, like, you know, the wind's blowing because there's leaves and somebody's cloak's going that way or their hair's going that way. But then there's, like, things falling from the sky. Like, a lot of times we use something called in film it's called a Dutch angle, where you basically like tilt the camera like this for like an action shot that really kind of subliminally communicates that like everything is out of control. So you're literally just like reaching into every pocket and pulling out all of your tools to try to communicate what it needs, because like this is as epic as I think Magic has ever gotten.
Yeah, I think we also tried to, on the, before it gets to you guys' side, try to supply as many tools as possible, from the art brief to what's in the world guide, of like things like Chris was saying, of maybe you could use some dust or there's embers floating around, or the writers are so good at adding like adjectives that just sort of inspire a particular type of pose or a generalization of what's going on.
Mom was the set that couldn't slow down. Other sets have mundane slice of life moments that you can kind of breathe a little bit. There's none of that in Mom. It's all high acting. So every single card has a deliberate movement or a pose that we're asking for, and the artists obviously deliver in spades, and they definitely help us actually find what we want. But it is, from the writing to the concept art to the illustration, it's all high octane blockbuster. I don't know how many times I'm going to say it. Action. This entire set.
Yeah, the action is right. Yeah, so good eye to catch that it's all moving. Yeah, awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Hello. My question is about the invasions, because a lot of the invasions are of planes that have not had full proper sets, and some of them are pretty obscure. So I'm wondering if there are any challenges with, like, how do you creating the visual language of, for example, like the invasion of Gobekhan. We've never been there. We really only know that Teo is from there, and there's not a lot of information about this particular plane and a lot of the other ones. So what were some of the challenges, or like how did you go about creating the visual language for all these different planes that we don't know that much about?
Yeah, so those were a lot of back and forth conversations. This one in particular, we took a lot of shape language from Teo himself and tried to impose that on the environment. And because he was a known quantity, trying to bring what environment he might look like he came from, and try and sort of make it up on the spot from what we were thinking about when we were inventing Teo all the way back in like War of the Spark time. We had to like go in the way back machine of like, what were we doing? What were we thinking? So it was a lot of sort of back and forth. Emily Tang and myself, and then Neil as well for the other planes that were being invaded, of kind of guesswork, and then allowing the artists enough freedom to sort of compose the piece in such a way that felt true to where Teo might be coming from, speaking of him in particular, but not limit him in such a way, especially with the battles, because they were so complex, and we asked a lot of the artists on the set as a whole, but on the battles in particular, it was a new horizontal aspect, so we didn't want to break anybody of like, this has to go exactly here, this has to be exactly that, but it's sort of more of a inspirational jumping off point.
Yeah, like Taylor's saying, the goal when we're writing these briefs for planes that we haven't seen before, we're not saying it has to be composed a certain way or I want this shot. We're giving world building elements from what we saw in Teo's previous cards or what we could intuit is important to Teo's design from back then. We're saying, hey, artists, we call this a card level solve, and we're like, hey, artists, here's all the tools you could possibly want. Please help us.
Yeah, please.
So it's really like a back and forth between like the writers and the art directors, and then the writers, artists, and the art directors to kind of like settle on a final direction when we get sketches and illustrations back.
Great. All right. Thank you for answering my question.
Yeah, thank you. Go pub. God, let's
Yeah.
Thanks.
I love the shirt.
Yes.
With March of the Machine, we see so many alternate borders and new alternate borders. My question is about, like, how do you maintain a consistent visual language and shorthand with so many new frames and borders and so many intertwined visual languages? How do you keep it consistent for a set this big?
Yeah, so for a set like March of the Machine, the toolkit from Norm and the stages of the invasion were so important because there were a couple things, well, more than a couple things that we're just making up at card level. So instead of it just feeling random, we wanted to create something that people will hopefully recognize as that particular plan that's been mentioned before, but add in some of the March of the Machine set dressing on top of it. So at least you know that it's from this particular set, and now we actually have some visuals that we can jump off to if we ever choose to explore that plan further.
I like when you're working with art directors, the tools they give you are very modular, and they let writers like myself and illustrators kind of cobble these things together in real time. And so it's great to have experienced art directors create different things that I can say, like, oh, include the invasion tree branches. You get to really flex your kind of creative muscles and use these tools and make sure that there's a consistent language on every card, and then we can focus on making sure that all the great events that we get to write about later actually appear on these cards.
Right.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you.
Hi. Firstly, thank you so much for this panel. It's been very insightful into like the world of like the art of Magic and the art industry as a whole. My question is specifically regarding the art industry as someone who is very interested in this kind of work and as an illustrator myself. I'm just kind of looking for advice, I guess, how you got into the industry, and as someone who especially deems their art style to be more stylized and perhaps unconventional, if there's anything there that would be maybe helpful to know.
Sure. Do you guys want to go?
I mean,
how you got it?
This is probably us and you. I would imagine if it's like a whole thing.
I'll end it.
I mean, for me, I do get this question pretty regularly, and
Sure.
I try to be like, so listen, anything I say may be dated because we're talking about 2007 or something.
Right, of course.
I mean, the thing I always tell people that are trying to break into the industry, I mean, obviously there's a lot of, especially in the fantasy game space, there's a lot of companies, and like Magic and D&D are kind of like the pinnacle at this
Right.
point. But a lot of people climb up through other games, other companies, get their stuff seen more. A lot of it, like, I never know what platform to tell people to like be visible on, but I'm just like, make your stuff as visible as possible.
Sure.
Just portfolios wherever the cool people are doing it these days. Just between making it visible and just honing your craft.
Absolutely.
Even if it's stylized. I mean, I feel like nowadays, even compared to some years in the past, like Magic has opened up to a lot more styles.
Definitely.
Both for main set stuff and, you know, like specialized side releases.
Absolutely.
Whatever we're calling those these days. But yeah, like it's really cool. I love that. I mean, my style is definitely more on the sort of classical illustrator end, but the variety is awesome. Like it'd be a shame
Absolutely.
if everything just kind of looked the same.
Yeah. So from the other side of it, as far as like where to put your stuff or what we're looking for, all of us in the studio are generally looking for stuff through the lens of Magic, but it doesn't mean that there aren't so many other things out there. And to what Chris was saying, Magic has kind of opened its eyes to so many different approaches. I can say that one particular site that we use all the time is ArtStation when we
Cool.
have time to scout people.
Absolutely.
So that'd be a great start. And we are going back and forth constantly on trying to build like a better avenue for people to reach out to the company and provide their portfolios as like
Yeah,
an easier
absolutely.
avenue into connecting with us. So it's
Sure.
not just like, I put my stuff out into the ether, and I have no idea if anybody has seen it. I have no idea if anybody's seen it. So hopefully that's to come in the next few years. So.
Cool, absolutely. Thank you so much. That's really helpful.
I think all you have to do is paint with magenta and and like bread and butter. That's it.
Right. I will keep that in mind.
Never gonna live this down.
Never ever. All right, thank you.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So we have time for one more question. So I think you'll be the last question here. I'm so sorry, we're almost out of time. So yeah.
Question for the artists. I was wondering what led you to your respective mediums of more digital and traditional art when creating Magic the Gathering card art?
Okay.
Yeah, it's a great question. What led you to painting traditionally or digitally in your case, Lydia?
Sure. Well, speaking for myself, I was actually, like, I went to art school in the early 2000s, and I basically studied both. So, but it's funny because at that point, nobody considered oil painting to be something that is for illustration. It was very much like a fine art thing. So all of my illustration classes were like, you're going to try watercolor, here's digital painting, blah, blah, blah. But like, I got thrown into these fine art electives, and I basically tried every single medium and was struggling with it aside from drawing and graphite until I tried oils. And it was like the second day of a still life painting class where I'm like, I think this is the one. Like, this is weird. And it just kind of clicked. Like all of our brains, I feel like you can be a multimedia person, but at least in my experience, like I just kind of knew when that was the one. But even like after I got out of art school, I would do some commissions for some clients traditionally in oils, some would be digital. I was all over the place. My first Magic card was actually digital, Rock's Charger from One Flux.
I didn't even know that. That's great.
Very basic Amen card. I think it was just a test from Jeremy Jarvis, to be honest. But so after that, I almost felt like I needed to ask permission to work traditionally, because like at the time everything was just headed toward digital, which is great. I mean, I love digital art as well. I'm just not really good at it. I think like when I paint digitally, it looks more like other people's stuff, and when I paint traditionally, it felt more like mine. So I basically came to him and was like, listen, can I try the second one traditionally and see how it goes? And he was like, yeah, go for it. And 16 years later, here we are. And I mean, for me, it was like I was kind of trying to make everybody happy at first, and I wasn't sure, but eventually I just kind of took the leap.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all so much for coming. I hope you enjoyed. One more round of applause, please, for our guests. And, of course, visit Chris and Livia in the art gallery this weekend to get some cards signed and just give a handshake of appreciation. So thanks for coming out. We'll see you next time.
Hey, Taylor. I think I'm